muting Seth in person. Okay. It's Linda. Okay, we are live here. And here we go live on Facebook. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. We're going to take a moment here to share the class on a few platforms, and then we will get going and we'll get rolling. So give us a moment here. It is Parshas Mishpatim. So Rock and Parsha. Good evening. You guys like hearing yourself? Just sharing it. You guys like hearing yourself? Let's see if this works. Okay. Just a moment. My tech support. You see, you're looking at tech support. Good evening, Jane. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Okay, let's see if it worked. Oh, it worked. Oh, no. Just a second. You get to hear me sing. Every week we do this. Okay, we're going to do it a lot easier this time. It's good. It's not good. Okay. Guys have such suspense. They're calling me. Why are they calling me during class? They obviously don't know me if they're calling during class. Okay, we covered all our bases. We posted it on all the pages, and we are good to go. It is Parshas Mishpatim. It is the sixth portion of the book of Exodus, sixth portion in the book of Shemos, and it's also Shabbos Mevarchim this week. This Shabbos, we're going to bless the new month of Adar, which means we are less than 3 weeks away from Purim. It's also Parshas Shkolim. The Shabbos that we bless the month of Adar, we always read the portion of Shkolim at the half a shekel, because the month of Adar was the cutoff time for the counting of the half a shekel. So we have 2 Torahs in Shul Shabbos. If you're in Bozeman, or if you're smart and you come to Bozeman, we have Mark Halowa from Yerushalayim, from Jerusalem, who grew up as a Kuwaiti Palestinian and is going to be in Bozeman to spend Shabbos with us, to tell us about his journey from Kuwait to Canada to find out that he's Jewish and how he ended up in Yerushalayim through Chavi's grandfather, Dr. Block. He'll be with us Friday night and Shabbos day. And of course, we'll have a Purim party in a couple of weeks. Lots of exciting things going on. Holiness, spirituality, and practicality. And here's where we go into practicality at the beginning of this week's Torah portion on page 458 in the Life Chumash that we use in Shul. We begin the portion of Mishpatim. Just to give you an idea, the Parsha of Mishpatim has 23 mitzvot aseh, 23 positive commandments, and 30 prohibitions. 30 of the biblical prohibitions. So there's a total of 53 mitzvahs in this one Torah portion. So out of 613 mitzvahs, 53 of them are in this one Torah portion, and it has in this 118 verses. So it's not even one of the longest Torah portions. No picture, no audio. What does that mean? Facebook people are telling me no picture, no audio. Just a second. Let's see if we can help them out. Wait, 1 second. I apologize, but a big part of the Chevra are live on Facebook. I want to do them some justice, and I'm just going to write live Parsha class. No video, no audio. What does that mean? Parsha class. Okay, let's see if we can do this. I apologize, my Zoom friends. There's some other Jews in the world that hopefully want to hear Some Parsha. Let's see if this works, and no nudniks will interrupt me with any WhatsApp calls. Okay. And if you're one of my nudnik friends, I'm going to disown you if you interrupt my class. Let's see if this does it. Okay. Okay, take two. We're going to try again. Parshas Mishpatim, as I was saying, it has 53 commandments, 23 positive, 30 prohibitions, and it begins with the laws of slavery. It begins with the laws of slavery, and it says like this. I'm just going to read the first 6 verses in English, so you'll have a general idea of the verses of slavery, and then we're going to get into a very, very interesting analysis from the Rebbe. That's a combination of the Rebbe in a talk in 1987, and then a talk from the Rebbe in the 70s. So this is a talk from the 80s and a talk from the 70s. But here's the verses. And these are the laws that you should set before them. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall work for 6 years, but in the 7th year he is to be released without liability. If he was unmarried when he entered, he shall be released unmarried. So if he came single, he leaves single. If he is married to a woman, when he comes in, then he's released with his wife. If his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, then the woman and her children remain her master's property, and he is dismissed alone. So during those 6 years of slavery, the master gives him a wife and they have children. The wife and the children that were provided to him by his master remain with the master. And he's free to go when the 6 years are up. If the slave says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free, then his master shall bring him to the judges, standing next to the door, a doorpost. His master shall pierce his ear with a pointed tool, right? He punctures a hole in his right ear. He must then serve forever, which forever means until the Yovel, until the Jubilee year. So here's the basic laws. You get sold into slavery. If you came with a wife, meaning your wife doesn't have to go into slavery. It's not Judaism. It just means that the master is obligated to take care of your wife while you're a slave. He's not just obligated to take care of you as a Jewish slave, but he's obligated to take care of your wife and family as well. 6 years are up, you go home. If you came single, you leave single. But if you married the woman that the master gave you to marry while you were enslaved, she and the children stay with the master. And if you choose to stay as well, we puncture your ear to remind you that slavery is not the right thing for a Jew. A Jew should never be a slave, because at Sinai, God said, Kali b'nei Yisrael avadim, you are my slaves. Therefore, the only entity we should ever be in service of in the form of slavery or servitude should be God. And when you give that up to be a slave to another human being, you have to be reminded of what servitude is meant to be. So just before we even get to Chassidus and before we get to any deeper layers, people say to me, so there's two schools of thought. First is, Rabbi, how could Judaism condone slavery? The other school of thought is, Rabbi, why are you teaching me about slavery? It's 2023, there's no slavery. So I want to answer first the second question, which is, if you think there's no slavery, you haven't met any people in this generation. You were living under you're under a rock. Slavery is not just if you're living in a master's home. Slavery is a mentality. And I don't know that we've ever been in a generation with a bigger form of slavery than today. We're enslaved to almost everything. Some would say we're enslaved to the government of the particular country you live in. Some would say you're enslaved to your gadgets. Others would say you're enslaved to the news. People would say, rightfully so, that you're enslaved to your work as workaholics. People are enslaved to their money. People are enslaved to their need for societal conformity. They need to conform. There's a load of slavery that makes biblical slavery look good. That's my answer to the second point. The first point is the Torah addresses slavery because the reality is that slavery was a real thing. And there are times that we do tell someone that the only way to get out of their trouble that they got themselves into is by going into a form of slavery. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the idea that you should never be in a position of being in servitude, why not? Maybe that's a better idea of how to pay up your debt to society when you mess up. Why, is it better to put someone in a prison cell? I mean, we can have a conversation. Yeah. We can have a conversation about prison or jail, where you sit in the cell and you're unproductive. You lack productivity, you lack meaning, you have to fight for survival while you're locked in a cubicle. Is that somehow a better? Is that not slavery? What is that? Sorry to break it to everyone. I know everyone thinks that slavery ended in America 200-something years ago, or 100-something years ago.
They're not doing anything for anybody. The government's just...
You're holding someone against their will, and of course they have to do things. Have you ever been to a prison? Apparently not. Baruch Hashem. I hope you never have to. But unfortunately, there's plenty of slave labor involved. By the way, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. All I'm saying is the idea that slavery is gone is above myself, both internally and externally. But that's not where I'm going in tonight's class. I'm not here to address all the universal issues that I cannot solve from this table here in the beautiful Lifson Library at the shul. You can't. I could talk about it. I could inspire. We could talk about having a different train of thought and a different perspective on how we see things. But we're not going to solve, right? I'm not running a coup against my government to figure out how to get rid of prisons. I'll leave that to Jared Kushner and Van Jones are going to work together to do prison reform, and they did. They did make some headway, and I hope they make more. But the point is that's out of my league. I don't know if it's above or below my pay grade, but either way, it's not in my pay grade. But what I do want to discuss today is a much deeper question, a question that honestly, anyone that studies Torah this week, if they opened up their Chumash, or they will on Shabbos and Shul, and they open up and they start reading the beginning of the Parsha, the question should jump out at them. And what's the question? Last week in Shul, for those of you that were here in Shul or wherever you are for Shul, we read the 10 Commandments. We had the giving of the Torah last week. Beautiful. We read those incredible 10 original commandments from Sinai and the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Now we're going into the first parsha, the first Torah portion after the giving of the Torah at Sinai. And what does it begin with? The first words. Slavery. A Jewish slave works for you for 6 years, and the 7th year he goes free. So there's two questions really about this that jump out right at you. Number one, why start a list, a parsha of 53 mitzvahs with a mitzvah, a commandment that is very, very rare? What do I mean by that? First of all, the laws of Jewish slaves only apply when there was Yovel, when the Jubilee existed. So there was a time in Jewish history when after every 7 cycles of the sabbatical year, right? Each sabbatical is every 7th year is the Shemitah, is a sabbatical year. 7 times 7 is 49. So at the end of the 49th year, it becomes a double sabbatical. The 6th year, the 7th year is Shemitah, the 49th year, and the 50th year is the Jubilee year. And the original lands in the land of Israel go back to its original owners. And then even if you got your ear punctured because you wanted to be a slave, assuming you live so long, you'll go free. In Judaism, the Yovel is considered olam. It's considered a eternity. So we're talking about a mitzvah, Jewish slavery, that only existed when there was Yovel, when the Jubilee year operation was in existence. And how did you end up being a Jewish slave? And this is an important point. If you're a ganav, if you're a thief, and you stole, and you got caught, and you have no way to pay back the money or the items worth the money, the value of the items that you stole, and the Beis Din tried to negotiate, the Jewish court tried to negotiate with you to find a way that you can make a payment plan, something, but you can't. You're absolutely broke. So then the Beis Din had no choice but to sell you as a slave. Right? So we're talking about a ganav, a thief. So it has to be when there's a jubilee year. It has to be someone that stole, and it has to be someone that stole and is so poor, which is a rare occasion that you're so poor and there's no family to bail you out. There's nobody to step up for you, that there was no other option but to sell you into slavery. Why would Mishpatim, the first portion after the giving of the Torah, where we're finally getting into the details of how human beings should act with each other, 53 mitzvahs, why start off with such an anomaly of a law, such an anomaly of a mitzvah of slavery? Furthermore, the Rebbe takes it a step further. To be a Jewish slave, first you have to steal. Well, thank you, Baruch. So there is another option where a person is so poor and he can't afford to sustain his family, so he sells himself into slavery. But again, in the Jewish community, that's even a bigger anomaly because we take care of each other. We have tzedakah, we have mils chesed, we have so many different ways of taking care of each other. The idea that you would say yourself, it's a moicher atzmai, but it's a very, very rare thing. The more common is where the Beis Din sells you for thievery. But in order to become a slave, you need to steal. When do we read about stealing? Later in our parsha. So in our same parsha, in Parshas Mishpatim, but later in the parsha, we read about stealing. It's out of order. First, there should be the stealing, and then should be the rule that because you stole, you ended up being a slave. And now, when you're a slave, this is how your master needs to treat you, and these are the rules involved. It's out of the order of the way things happen, because in order to be a slave, first you have to steal. Why mention thievery after you already mentioned slavery? Which leads us to a clear conclusion. That's the name of Chavi's blog, Clear as Mud. It's clear, meaning it becomes crystallized that the Torah started with slavery because he's trying to impart a message for us that is above all of the things we just asked. And what could that be? So the Rebbe says as follows, and when I read it, it's so quintessential, Rebbe, to see the Torah and to see humanity from this incredible lens, to remind us of how important it is to be sensitive and compassionate and empathetic to other human beings. You know, as an intro to that, I just want to say that it's fascinating how, as a society, right, there used to be the presumption of innocence. Now there's the presumptions of guilt. The presumption of guilt. Number one, you're guilty. You know the story with the Yiddish, famous story. The guy says, I heard in shul that your sister's a prostitute. He says, what do you mean? I don't even have a sister. He says, okay, now go tell everyone that you don't have a sister. Right? In other words, disproving the rumor is very hard. But we live in a society today where we don't give people the benefit of the doubt. Right? Someone's on a plane, there's a mother on a plane with a little kid screaming, and you want to shoot them. What kind of stupid mother is this that doesn't quiet their kid down? What should healthy, compassionate, empathetic people do? Say to themselves, what don't I know about this woman? Maybe she just lost her husband and she's traveling as a single mom for the first time. Maybe her husband's in the Cleveland Clinic getting cancer treatment and she's traveling to visit. What do I know about this person? Nothing. But what do we do? What's the first thing we do? Judgment. Now, if you think about that, now think about slavery. When you think of a slave, you think of someone that's a spiritually dysfunctional human being. He was caught stealing, and he's such a loser, he couldn't even get his act together. He had to end up in slavery. I should worry about how this nudnik, this no goodnik is treated? I should give respect and dignity and treat this person with dignity? So, right at the beginning of Mishpatim, when we're going to talk about how a Jew is supposed to act in their materialistic physical world, in their environment, trying to educate us how to lift ourselves up to a higher plane where we can see the world from a more healthy, more holy perspective. And through that, transform this physical world to be a better and holier place of goodness and kindness. So if that's the case, what better place to begin that emphasis than by taking a slave who has every reason for society to say he's a nobody? I should worry about this person. Comes along the Torah and says, here's a set of laws. And by the way, if you open up in the Rambam or in the Shulchan Aruch, the laws of how to treat a slave, how to treat a Jewish slave, it's immense. These 6 verses that we just read in the beginning of Mishpatim have tens and tens of halachas of how you have to treat them. What you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, what if, and what if, and what if, a whole thing with how do you treat a slave? For heaven's sake, how often does it happen? It's not about how often it happens, it's about what it does to train our minds to understand the Torah's approach and how we are supposed to see another human being, even one who we believe sincerely is low on the totem pole of people you should care about and whose dignity should matter to you. So much so that you need to treat this person so well and take care of their wife and children with total empathy and total compassion until the day the person goes free. And so it really represents to us not just the spiritual and holy aspect of being a Jew, because that we tend to be good at. Oh, right? You know, famous thing where they say why Jews have so many why the cardiologist discovered why Jews have so many heart problems? Because we're Jewish in our heart. No, because we're Jewish in our heart. Everything's in our heart. So of course we have heart issues. To be a Jew is not just about what you do on the inside between you and God and your holy moments in shul and your spiritual ecstasy on some mountaintop. It's about how you treat another human being in the physical, mundane, materialistic world. And there's no better manifestation of that than the way it's epitomized when it comes to how you treat a slave. I got someone complain to me. You want to hear a complaint? We had the Super Soul party for the homeless people on Sunday in the shul. So some nudnik from New York saw it online, and he said to me, I don't understand. You have nothing better to do with your life than host a party for non-Jews in the shul? That was the response. You know what I responded to him? Kushan tachas. And then I laid it into him. I said, which Judaism did you study? Did you not read last week the way Moshe greeted his father-in-law Yisro, who was an idolater of Midian? He greeted him with respect and dignity. Who taught you how to deal with human beings? Comes along Mishpatim and says a guy is a troublemaker of society and he ends up in the worst case scenario. It's easy to judge them. But the right thing to do is not to judge. It's to be there with love, kindness, compassion, and even understanding. But he stole. It's not about, by the way, that's not even relevant. I mean, it's a good point. To always ask yourself why at first, right? The famous story with Mayor LaGuardia, and I've shared it before, Mayor LaGuardia of New York, when he did night court, and I know I sound like a broken tape recorder because I said it so many times, he did night court once, and a woman was being charged for stealing bread from a local grocery. And he said to I don't want to get into the whole long story, but the shorter version is, he said to the woman, you know, you stole. She said, I know I stole, but I had to feed my grandchildren, otherwise they would starve. She says, yeah, but you stole, and therefore you have to pay a fine to the owner of the store. And then he turned to everyone sitting in the courtroom and said, and all of you are going to pay X amount of money as a fine too, for the fact that we live in a city where a woman has to steal in order to give bread to her grandchildren. So it was a balancing act. So there's no question. We can always ask why a person stole, but it doesn't take away the crime, because otherwise you end up in a place where you're not dealing with crime. Oh, it's not their fault. Yes, it is their fault. They stole. That's their responsibility. That being said, judging them as if they're you don't know what brought them to where they were. In today's day, for example, I'll give you a good example, drugs. The Torah wasn't dealing with drugs, but someone steals and they're high on who knows what. Do you know that here in Bozeman, in the high school, I found out this week in a meeting with a family, in the high school, there's hard drugs being sold in the high school to 15-year-old kids. So you expect that 15-year-old kid that's now high on some crazy. So if they steal, you have to give them the punishment, but with compassion, with care, with empathy. Why have we lost our humanity? What gives us permission to walk around on our high horse judging people? Because we think we're better than everyone. We're not. We're more blessed. We're more responsible. We're perhaps more devoted citizens. But don't judge. I made that mistake enough times in my life, and I've shared with the community about the time I judged someone for not showing up for Shabbos, And it turns out it was a big tragedy and they didn't show up, not by their choice, but I was easy to judge. Judging is horrible. And we wouldn't want anyone to do it to us. Right? How many times do we judge someone and say, what's up with you today? You're so different than you always are. Is everything okay? So what do you want the person to say? Hey, buddy, just want you to know that my life was getting really hard. And 3 days ago, I just started a new med for for mental illness. So it's having an effect on me. Is that what you'd like him to make the announcement in shul? So you think you're being all funny and cute and judgmental, but really you're being judgmental and you don't know what the real story is. The guy just lost his job and he comes to shul. Come on, cheer up. You know, what are you talking about? You don't know the guy just lost his job. He has no idea how he's going to feed his family on Monday. Now, the fact that he should have bitachon, he should have trust that Hashem will take care of him because Hashem always does, that's for him to deal with God, not for you to decide for them. But the mentality of guilty until proven innocent is not the Jewish approach. But it goes even a little further. Because the question could also be asked, why does the Torah start with something negative, right? There's a famous statement in the Gemara, Bava Basra, actually, we'll get to it soon. We don't start with negativity. So if we don't start with negativity, okay, I get you want to talk about slavery first, but why start with something negative? So here the Rebbe says something so incredible. No, it's really eye-opening. What is thievery? Thievery is result, right? The famous difference in the Talmud, ganav in Hebrew and a gazlan. Ligzol v'lignov. What's the difference? Gneva, thievery, is when you sneak in the middle of the night when no one's watching or during the day, but you make sure no one can see you. A ligzol, to be a gazlan, is a robber. What's a robber? A guy that goes robs a bank in the middle of the day, doesn't care. So open versus in secret. But here, the Torah, who gets sold into slavery? A ganav, someone that steals in secret. So the Rebbe says that in a sense, every one of us gets to a point in our life where we act like thieves. What does that mean? Last week was the giving of the Torah. Giving of the Torah, Ata Reis Ladaski Hashem Hu Elokim. You have revealed, you have shown for all of us to know that Hashem is the Lord, that God is the Lord. The greatest revelation to ever happen. But what happens after Sinai, the week later? A Jew says to themselves, when I was having a revelation from God at Sinai, it was impossible for me to sin because it was direct revelation of holy of God. How could I sin? But now that God is hiding again and I don't see him the way I did at Sinai, you know what? Maybe he's not paying attention. Maybe I could sneak in a little sin. Whereas we say, a little sin here and there. No one's wild. God has better things to worry about than my little shenanigans. Comes along the first parsha after the giving of the Torah and says, when you're a thief, you end up enslaved, right? When you get into that mentality of living like a thief where you think God doesn't see what you're doing, you end up from one to the next. Before you know it, you end up not having control over your behavior. And then you don't know where that's going to end up. So what do you need to do? You need to free yourself, right? It talks about after the 6th year to free yourself. Free yourself. Through what? Through tshuva. So it's a reminder to us not to live lives like thieves. Think that God doesn't see and doesn't know, or if he does know, he doesn't care. Sometimes people steal and they think, well, I know the person might know that I stole, but I know they don't care because they have so much money, it doesn't matter to them. Like the person who steals from Walmart because he says the Walton family doesn't really need it. They justify it. Sometimes when we steal, sometimes when we hide from God, it's because we say God doesn't really care about this detail, but he does. And it's his world you're stealing from. You're who you think you're hiding from. So the Torah comes along and says the first thing we're going to talk about after Sinai is slavery, to remind us that slavery comes from stealing. And stealing is all about hiding what you're really up to and what you're really doing. And don't ever think that you can do that with God. You can't. it will catch up with you because God sees and knows everything. So it's almost like a twofold, these first 6 verses of the parsha is twofold. Number one, it teaches us incredible level of sensitivity. Something that I think is so important. So important. You know, when we had the Super Bowl thing on Sunday, one of my kids asked me why this person was dressed like this and that person was dressed like that. These were homeless people. And let me tell you, the shul had a stench, a smell that represented people that unfortunately have not had a chance to have a shower in a long time. You know what? I didn't run away from the smell. I wasn't even offended by it because I sat table by table, chair by chair, shaking hands, 1 or 2 hugs, and talking to these people and their incredible stories with so much sadness. So much sadness. How could we judge? But we do. We drive by in our hutsy-futsy cars and cozy with our butt warmers. You know, God forbid our steering wheels are warm, the tush is warm, everything's warm. We feel like, and we drive by, we give them $1, and we think like we're the big machas because we gave them $1. It's a good thing to give them $1, but let's never forget the humanity here. These are human beings that probably at some point in their life drove a car just like us. And somehow through the humanity, the sensitivity is so important. But secondly, let's not forget in our own personal service of Hashem, not to be a thief, not to think that our master doesn't know what we're up to, because he does. And he watches us to see how we're doing spiritually, how we're doing in transforming the world for the better, and how we're doing bin adam l'chaveri. God watches every moment to see how we're doing between ourselves and our neighbors. How are we treating our fellow? This last 6 days, my family has been on a massive journey with our septic tank failing. A brand new septic tank, 4 years old, with the greatest septic minds in Bozeman, and that's going to be a trademark, the greatest septic minds in Bozeman, standing and breaking their heads in my front yard because they were baffled trying to figure out where things went wrong, and they couldn't. They dug up my draining field. It was a rocking week. And late last night, the owner of the company, big company, was still standing in my yard with a headlamp at 8 o'clock at night. And you know what I learned mostly from this whole week? Is that I live in a community with incredible people. When they saw how foreign pipes and PVC and elbows mean to this rabbi, they realized that there's no hope for him to figure any of this out on his own. So person after person, company after company, neighbor after neighbor. My neighbor has an excavating machine. He was there himself digging and the amount of kindness and love and humanity was so real that all I kept thinking to myself, aside from thanking these people, and no, they didn't do it for free. I'm going to get a bill in Tatens Tatnarain, as we say. It's going to be, I guess that's the bill. But they did it immediately, and they did it with concern, and they did it with compassion, and they worked so hard, and they treated me with dignity. And the only thing I kept thinking was how I wish that I could do the same. Now, I'm not in denial. I know I help a lot of people, but there was something about it when someone has nowhere else to go. It's one of these unique, septic, I mean, I could change bulbs, I could hang up pictures maybe, but septic tanks? It's not done yet. They're going to continue tomorrow. We're almost there. I would say we're 3/4 of the way to salvation, Baruch Hashem. But humanity. When a society loses its humanity, when money comes before people, when systems come before individuals, sorry, you missed the cutoff date. Talking about human beings. And we must never forget that. And that's why the Torah starts with slaves. Because those are the people that we love to throw under the bus and say, it's your fault. You should have dealt with it before. That's not our job. Our job is to be the helpers, not the judges. May we merit a time when the world has no such tsaras, no such issues. May we merit a time when the neighbors of Israel, the Arabs, will show humanity towards their Israeli brethren. They won't ram into bus stations and kill beautiful, young, innocent children. May the neshama of those two beautiful Pele brothers find comfort in the heavenly abode, and may the father have a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery. May the mother with the other children find the courage and comfort that they need to survive through this, losing two children on a Friday afternoon, an hour before Shabbos, simply because someone was trained not to have compassion and humanity and empathy for human beings. That world needs to come to an end, and we need to usher in a new era. But that era starts today, in how we treat and how we see and how we deal with our fellow human beings, no matter what it says on the bumper sticker on their car. It's not relevant. Have a wonderful week. Have a compassionate week. Have an empathetic week. Have a week of kindness, love, and mercy for your fellow. And if you're in Bozeman, come see us Shabbos. Otherwise, we'll see you back here soon. Sei gesund and have a rockin' Shabbos Mevarchim.
It's almost like consciousness level in a way where if you're almost in a negative mode, you have consciousness is considered low, and when your conscious is high, you're in a giving, loving kind of a state, and there's something about the world can do wonderful things when the world becomes a positive.
Right, but
You're speaking as a Jew.
No. I'm saying is that you could talk about consciousness, and that becomes a whole universal thing.
But consciousness is a way that you treat, the way that you act.
Right, but I'm saying that instead of focusing on universal consciousness,
well, yeah,
let's focus on Seth Robbins' consciousness. So when Seth Robbins pulls up to his house and he wants to pull him with his big monstrosity of a truck, but his neighbor, a putz, parked his car like such a crooked driver that it made it really complicated for you to get into your driveway. And you want to say a couple of not nice words to yourself about your neighbor and the way they park. You have done that. And what I'm saying is, what the Torah is telling us is you should pause and say, hold on. Maybe my neighbor was coming home to the doctor with his kid, and the kid is with fever and he's all tzamished, and he pulled up, or his wife called him that she's not feeling well and he came running. What do you know? By the way, what I'm telling you now is it's not natural. It's almost unnatural.
To pause and
To pause and to say, let me take the sensitive route, not the judgmental route. But that's what the Torah is demanding of us.
why is human, or is it human nature to go the other direction?
We've been trained, right? You never, very simple. I don't know about from when. I'm not a prophet. I don't know. All I know is that when you turn on your TV at night, let's assume, I'm just going to guess that you watch CNN. Okay, mostly. So you turn on CNN and Wolf Blitzer, this nice Alta Yid, who's been on, Wolf Blitzer's been on TV since my grandmother was born. So he's been on TV for a few centuries, and he's standing there. Yeah, when's the last time you turned on and he said, the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer, and he shared good news?
Oh, rare.
Very rare.
And it would be only like our some whatever.
Very rare. You know what it is? There's a war here, there's bloodshed here, they're dying here, there's a plague coming there, there's nuclear weapons there, COVID and schmovid and this and all day with negative babamaisis. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today in Montana, 218 women gave birth to healthy baby children. Breaking news today, out of Yellowstone, a new species of insects was discovered by the Yellowstone. No, you never hear anything good. When COVID was happening, I begged everyone. I said, imagine if the Chronicle every morning when they had every day in the paper, 62 more Montana deaths from COVID, right? No problem. You feel it's important to share. At least on the other hand, say 12 new babies born in Bozeman today that are healthy.
What about it? Do you have something to tell them?
So my point is that we've been trained to see the worst in humanity. And what the Torah is telling us is that we are to be sensitive and see and seek, not just seek to give people the benefit of the doubt. And that's a wonderful way to live. Because like Chavi always tells me, we don't always need to look for who to blame. A whole day we're looking. It's, the economy, it's Obama's fault. It's Bush's fault. It's Trump's fault. It's from the day I was born, it's every president's fault. Maybe it's the fault of all us Americans that live like fat cows and sit in Escalades with Sirius XM radio and 6,200 channels of television. And 3G wasn't a good, so we went to 4G, 5G, 7G. Maybe that's the reason the economy's fakak. But no, a whole day we pontificate. Why? Because we have someone to blame. That's not a Torah way. The Torah way is to see another human being and see what the potential good is there. And until we learn as a society to do that, which we learn from the laws of slavery, we're failing at being human, at being healthy human beings. L'chaim. Any questions on Zoom?